A married couple was sitting at dinner when the husband casually said, "Tomorrow your mother is coming. We need to sort out the issue with your inheritance." He calmly explained that his mother-in-law had already planned out the $5 million that his wife inherited from her deceased father. The young woman only nodded obediently and continued eating, not revealing her true feelings. Good day, dear listeners. I am glad to welcome you to my channel. I present to you a new interesting story. Enjoy listening. Kira still remembered the smell of the hospital corridors on that February day 7 years ago. Dad passed away quietly, as he had lived his last years. He did not want to bother anyone, even dying of cancer. He apologized to the nurses for causing trouble. "Daughter," he whispered on the last day, squeezing her hand with his emaciated fingers, "I will leave you everything I could save, an apartment and money. Just promise me you will spend it on yourself, on your happiness. You deserve a better life." Quote. Kira nodded through her tears, not realizing then how prophetic these words would turn out to be. The inheritance turned out to be substantial. A 3-room apartment in a good area and 5 million rubles in a bank account. For a 23-year-old girl working as a designer in a small studio for 30,000 a month, this was simply astronomical money. For the first time in her life, she could not count every penny, not deny herself a cafe with friends, buy normal clothes instead of secondhand. 6 months after her father's funeral, Kira met Dmitry at a corporate party of the customer's company. A tall, slightly shy programmer, with intelligent eyes behind glasses in a thin frame. He spoke about his work with such enthusiasm that even boring technical details sounded exciting. And when he learned that she was a designer, his eyes lit up even brighter. "Can you imagine what projects we could do together?" he said passionately at a cafe table on their 3rd date. "I program interfaces, you design them. We complement each other perfectly." Quote. Kira smiled, looking at his inspired face. After her father's death, she missed this so much, someone's sincere joy, plans for the future, just living human warmth. Dmitry was attentive, caring, never late for a date, and always remembered that she did not like olives in salad. Kira did not tell him about the inheritance right away. The memories of classmates who suddenly became incredibly friendly after learning about her financial situation were too fresh. There were too many people around with burning eyes and sudden problems that required an urgent financial solution. But Dmitry was different. When, after 3 months of their relationship, she carefully hinted that her dad left her some savings, he only hugged her tighter. "The main thing is that you have good memories of him," Dmitry said then. "Money comes and goes, but love remains forever." The wedding was modest, in a small circle. Dmitry insisted on dividing the expenses equally, although Kira offered to take on everything herself. Quote. "I want this to be our holiday," he explained, "and your charity." Such delicacy moved her to tears. It seemed that she had finally found a man who loved her, and not her bank account. The first months of family life were like a fairy tale. They rented a small apartment. Kira suggested moving into her father's, but Dmitry said that he wanted to get on his feet first, so that later they could move in as equal partners. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together, watched movies, made plans. Dmitry earned about 80,000 at an IT company. Kira was in her 30s at a design studio. It was enough to live on, and there was even some left over for small joys. Kira almost never thought about her inheritance. The money was on deposit, the apartment was empty. She sometimes came there to air it out and check if everything was okay. Dmitry never hinted that they could live better with this money. Elvira Gennadievna appeared in their lives in the 4th month of marriage. "Mommy wants to meet you," Dmitri said on Friday evening. "She's been waiting so long for me to get married. She'll be arriving tomorrow for dinner." Kira put off her weekend plans and started getting ready for the meeting. She cleaned the apartment until it sparkled, bought groceries for the festive dinner, and even picked out a new dress for herself, formal but elegant, to make a good impression. Elvira Genadievna turned out to be a woman of about 55, with carefully styled hair, a noble chestnut color, and impeccable makeup. She was dressed expensively, but with taste. It was obvious that she was used to quality things. She held herself with dignity, which bordered on arrogance. "Oh, how cute," she drawled, casting an appraising glance at Kira. "Did Dima praise you so much?" The dinner passed in a tensely polite atmosphere. Elvira Genadievna talked about her work in the ministry, from which she had recently retired, about how hard it was for her to live alone in a large apartment after her husband's death. Dmitri listened with awe, occasionally inserting admiring comments about what a wonderful mother he had. Quote, "And where do you work, my dear?" his mother-in-law asked, delicately pushing away a plate with an uneaten salad. "In a design studio," Kira answered. "We make corporate identity, advertising products." "Oh, how interesting." Elvira Genadievna clearly had no idea what designers did, but she politely feigned interest. "And how much do they pay in this, what's-its-name studio?" Dmitri frowned slightly. Apparently, his mother's straightforwardness embarrassed him, but Kira answered honestly, a month. "A little, of course, but I love my job. 30,000. Elvira Genadievna repeated thoughtfully, "Well, not everyone is given the opportunity to earn like my Dimachka. The main thing is that you are a good housewife." The dinner was excellent, by the way. After dinner, when mother left, Dmitri was unusually affectionate. Quote, "Mommy, I really liked you," he said, hugging Kira. She immediately said that I have good taste. Don't be offended that she is a little straightforward. She is just used to saying what she thinks. Kira nodded, although something in her mother-in-law's behavior made her wary. She was looking at the apartment, the furniture too carefully, even looking into the refrigerator under the pretext of helping with the dishes. And that look when Kira mentioned her salary, as if she was figuring something out in her mind. The next visit took place a week later. This time Elvira Genadievna was noticeably more relaxed, felt almost at home, brought a cake from an expensive pastry shop and a bottle of French perfume for her daughter-in-law. "Such a modest girl needs to learn to value herself," she said, watching Kira sniff the unfamiliar aroma. Good perfume is an investment in femininity. At dinner, the conversation somehow turned to apartments and real estate prices. "I'm thinking of selling mine and buying something smaller," Elvira Genadievna thought out loud. A 4-room apartment for a single woman is an extravagance, but prices are such now. They sell for one amount, but you have to buy more. Dmitri nodded sympathetically, but Kira was silent. Something told her that this conversation was not accidental. "By the way, what kind of apartment did your dad have?" the mother-in-law asked casually. "A 3-room apartment," Kira answered. "In the central area." "Wow." Elvira Genadievna feigned admiration. "It's worth at least 5 million now. It turns out you're a rich heiress." Quote, "Mom," Dmitri began embarrassedly. "What's there to be embarrassed about?" She waved him off. "The family should know about the family budget. Otherwise, you live here in a rented apartment, throwing money away, and your own property is empty." In the evening, when they were alone, Dmitri cautiously started a conversation. "Kira, Mom is right. We pay 25,000 a month for rent. That's 300,000 a year. We could buy a car in 3 years. Do you want to move into Dad's apartment?" Kira asked. "I don't want to. I don't want to, he answered hastily. I'm just thinking, maybe I should rent it out. It wouldn't hurt to have some extra income for the family. Quote, Kira agreed. Indeed, why should the apartment sit idle? A month later, Dad's 3-room apartment was rented out for $40,000 to a young family with a child. Kira put the money in a joint account. It was more honest that way. And a month later, Elvira Genadivna came home upset. Can you imagine? A pipe burst at the dacha, she said dramatically. The water flooded the entire basement. All my preparations for the winter were lost there. The plumbers say, the whole system needs to be replaced, and that costs a lot of money. Quote, how much? Asked Dmitri. Well, if you do everything right, then 1.4, maybe a little less. If you get cheaper materials. But where will I get that kind of money? My pension is pennies. No savings. Dmitri was silent thoughtfully, then looked at Kira. We just got some income from renting out the apartment, he began cautiously. And there's money in the deposit. Maybe we should help Mom, after all, it is a family. Kira felt that something was wrong, but it was difficult to object. Indeed, her mother-in-law is in trouble. Dmitri is worried, and they have money. And 400,000 is not such a huge amount compared to the 5 million inheritance. Of course, she agreed, we will help. Elvira Genadivna burst into tears of gratitude, hugged her daughter-in-law, called her a guardian angel and the best daughter-in-law in the world. Dmitri was beaming with happiness. His wife and mother had finally found a common language. Only much later Kira would understand that it was at that moment that her slow path to ruin began. In the meantime, she was sincerely happy that she had been able to help her family. After all, Dad wanted the inheritance to bring her happiness. Isn't happiness harmony in the family, the ungrateful eyes of a husband, the feeling that you are needed and important? The money was withdrawn from the deposit the next day. Elvira Genadivna kissed Kira again, promised that she would never forget it, and hurried to do the repairs. And a week later she came to visit again. This time with detailed photographs of the dacha before and after the repairs. The pipes were indeed changed, but at the same time Elvira Genadivna decided to update the tiles in the bathroom, change the plumbing in the toilet and order new furniture for the kitchen. Quote, but since they had already started, why do it halfway? She explained, leafing through the photos. The craftsman had already been there anyway. It was a convenient moment, and it turned out like in a magazine. It really did turn out beautiful, expensive, stylish, modern. And Kira remained silent, although her heart sank anxiously. 400,000 for replacing the pipes turned into a full-fledged European-style renovation, which clearly cost more than the agreed amount. But most importantly, a new sparkle appeared in Elvira Genadivna's eyes. The sparkle of a person who understood, this family has money and it can be accessed. You just need to ask correctly. They celebrated the new year at Elvira Genadivna's dacha. Her mother-in-law insisted, saying that after such a luxurious renovation, it would be a sin not to show the updated house to her family. Kira obediently prepared salads. Dmitri brought champagne and gifts. Oh, what beauty it turned out to be. Quote, she admired, photographing every corner of the renovated bathroom. Elvira Genadivna, you simply have a palace. The mother-in-law beamed with pleasure, showed the Italian tiles, talked about German plumbing and Austrian furniture. It's all thanks to my golden daughter-in-law, she was touched, hugging Kira. Such a kind heart. Not every girl would agree to help her mother-in-law in a difficult moment. At the festive table, Elvira Genadivna was unusually talkative, talking about her neighbors who were dying of envy, looking at her renovated house. About how the plumbers admired the quality of the materials. About plans for the next summer cottage season. Now you can invite guests without being ashamed of the old furnishings. The only thing that upsets me, she sighed at the end of the evening, is the road to the dacha. Buses with transfers are just torture, especially when the bags are heavy or the weather is bad. Quote, And do the neighbors drive cars? Dmitry asked. All of them. Someone even has 2 cars. One lives in the city, the other lives at the dacha all the time, and I walk alone, like the last beggar. Kira sensed something was wrong. The same notes appeared in her mother-in-law's voice as before the story with the pipes. Quote, "Mom, you never complained about public transport before," Dmitry noted cautiously. "But the dacha used to be appropriate," Elvira Gennadievna threw up her hands. "I was ashamed to invite people, but now that everything has turned out so beautifully, I want to live up to it myself. Imagine, my former colleagues from the ministry will come, and I tell them, 'Wait, I'll go to the bus stop to catch a bus.'" Dmitry nodded thoughtfully. Kira was silent, but inside everything was clenched with a premonition. "Of course, I understand that cars are expensive now," the mother-in-law continued. "After all, you can buy something used for 500,000 or 700,000 if the mileage is lower." Quote, "Mom, I have a car," Dmitry reminded. "I can drive you." "My dear Dymochka," Elvira Gennadievna smiled condescendingly. "You are a busy person, you have a job, a wife, you can't hang on the children's necks. And then, your car is already old, it's about 7 years old. It's still okay for city trips. But for the dacha, the road there is broken, you can break something." After the New Year holidays, the topic of the car came up regularly. Elvira Gennadievna would tell how her neighbor Galina Mikhailovna bought herself a brand new crossover and now goes to the dacha every weekend. Then she would complain about radiculitis, which had worsened from sitting on buses for a long time. Then she would sigh about how uncomfortable it was carrying food for the dacha on public transport. "Yesterday I was carrying a head of cabbage, and the whole bus was looking at me sideways," she said sadly during another family dinner. "At my age, I felt ashamed to ride the bus with cabbage." Dmitry would always get gloomy after such conversations, and then, when they were alone, he would start to carefully test the waters. "Kir, what do you think about a car for Mom?" "Dim, she has a license, right?" Quote, Kira clarified. "Of course she does. She worked at the ministry, they had official cars there. They drive great. Why would she need her own car if you could drive her?" "Well, she doesn't want to get in the way. And Mom is no longer young, it's hard for her on public transport. And the dacha is her outlet, especially after her father's death." Kira understood where the conversation was leading, but for now she kept quiet. The 400,000 spent on the dacha could still be explained by force majeure, but buying a car is a planned spending of her inheritance on mother-in-law's whims. Elvira Gennadievna dealt the final blow in mid-February. She came to visit with red eyes and shaking hands. "What happened?" Dmitry became alarmed. "Galina Mikhailovna got into an accident in her crossover yesterday," his mother-in-law sobbed. "Thank God, she survived, but the car was all dented. Do you know what she told me? Elvira, how right you were not to rush into buying. It is better to buy a good car with modern safety systems right away than to risk your life later." "And what, is she going to buy a new one now?" Kira asked. "Yes, for he says that safety is more important than money. And they dissuade me from looking at used cars. At our age, he says, saving on safety is stupid." Dmitry darkened. Kira felt the ground slipping out from under her feet. 700,000 for a used car suddenly turned into 200 million for a new one. "Mom, maybe we shouldn't rush," Dmitry suggested weakly. "Think about it some more?" "Dymochka," Elvira Gennadievna smiled sadly. "I've already thought it all over. If I can't afford a normal car, then I'll continue to ride the bus. God willing, I'll somehow live to old age on public transport." Quote. She said this in a tone as if she were saying goodbye to life. Dmitry walked around the apartment gloomier than a storm cloud, and Kira understood that the outcome was not inevitable. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. "Kir, you can't do this. Mom is alone. She has no one but us." Yes, $1 million is a lot, but she has money, and mom is not asking for some nonsense. A car is a necessity, especially at her age. Quote. Kira began cautiously. Why can't she take out a loan or an installment plan? She's already 55. What loan? And why overpay the bank if we have spare money? This is not our money, Kira said quietly. This is my inheritance. Dmitry froze, then looked at her resentfully. So now we are dividing what is yours and what is mine. I thought we had a family, a shared budget. A shared budget is when both contribute, but it turns out that we are only spending my money. Quote. Kira. Dmitry was sincerely indignant. I work, I bring my salary home, I pay for food, for utilities. And what does your salary go towards? I save it for our future, for an apartment, for the children. I thought it was obvious. Kira remained silent. The logic was ironclad. We are spending my money on your mother now. We are saving your money for our abstract future. Convenient, but she didn't want to argue with her husband, and Dmitry was right. A car is really a necessity for an elderly person. Maybe she is just being greedy. They bought the car a week later. A white crossover of the latest model with a bunch of electronic gadgets. Elvira Genadivna was beaming with happiness, hugging Kira, calling her daughter and benefactress. Quote, I will never forget this, she swore. Such a daughter-in-law is a gift from fate. And a month later, resorts began. At first, this was presented as concern for health. Elvira Genadivna came with the results of the examination. The pressure is jumping, the heart is acting up. The doctor recommends sanatorium and resort treatment. Quote, of course, I understand that it's expensive, she sighed. What can you do? Health is more important. I'll save from my pension, and by autumn I'll have enough for a trip to Kislovodsk. How much does the trip cost? Dmitry asked. With treatment and food, 120. A lot, of course, but the doctor says that it's better to get proper treatment once than to run around hospitals later. Dmitry glanced at Kira. She mentally sighed. 120,000 didn't seem like such a terrible sum against the backdrop of the millions spent. Quote, Mom, why wait until autumn? Dmitry said. Go in the spring, the season will just start. Where would I get that kind of money? Elvira Genadivna threw up her hands. We'll help, he declared decisively, without even consulting his wife. Kira remained silent. What can you say? My mother-in-law's health is really more important than money, but Kislovodsk turned out to be just the beginning. Elvira Genadivna returned rested, tanned, full of impressions. She told me about the mineral springs, about the miraculous procedures, about her new acquaintances. Quote, can you imagine? I met a woman from St. Petersburg there, she shared enthusiastically. So, she has been going to resorts for 10 years in a row. She says that this is the only way to maintain health at our age. Sometimes to Crimea, sometimes to Krasnodar Krai, sometimes abroad. Abroad, Dmitry was surprised. Well, yes, to the Czech Republic, for example. The Korlovar springs are very good for the stomach. Or to Germany, where they treat cardiovascular diseases. True, it is a bit expensive, but what an effect. By autumn, Elvira Genadivna was getting ready to go on another trip. This time to Sochi to consolidate the result, and in the winter she suddenly wanted to go to Egypt for joint prevention. In the spring, she was drawn to Crimea. Mountain air is so good for my age. Each trip cost from 100 to 200,000 rubles. Dmitry each time referred to his mother's health, to the fact that she had worked all her life and deserved a rest, to the fact that money should bring joy. And between trips, Elvira Genadivna talked about her resort friends, about how interesting and educated they all were, how well they lived, about how important it is not to lock yourself in four walls, but to actively spend time, travel, and learn about the world. Galina Stepanovna, whom I met in Egypt, says, Elvira, money is not an end in itself, but a means for a full life. That's how I try to live. Quote, fully. Kira worked in her design studio, received her $30,000 a month, and understood that her inheritance was melting like snow under the spring sun. Of the $5 million, a little more than 3 remained in a year and a half. And Dmitry regularly saved his $80,000 a month in an account that called Our Future. Sometimes Kira looked at his banking application. More than $1 million had already accumulated there, but for some reason this money was never spent on her mother's needs. She cautiously started the conversation one evening. Maybe sometimes you could help your mother out of your savings? Kira, well, you understand, this is our reserve for the apartment. If we spend it, then we will have to save for years. And my inheritance? Well, the inheritance is, you could say, a bonus, unplanned money. And my savings are the result of our joint planning. The logic was the same. We spend your money, we save my money. And each time Kira gave in to herself, because she loved her husband, because she did not want conflicts, because she hoped that Elvira Gennadievna would calm down any minute and stop inventing new needs. But her mother-in-law did not calm down. On the contrary, her appetites grew. After the car and the resorts, other needs appeared. New furniture for the city apartment, otherwise it would be embarrassing to invite friends. Expensive clothes, you can't go to a sanatorium in just anything. Jewelry. At my age, a woman should look respectable. And every time there were tears of gratitude, vows to never forget such kindness, stories about what a wonderful wife and daughter-in-law Kira was. And then, when another request was granted, Elvira Gennadievna began to plan the next expense, as if it had become her main hobby, to think of what else she could spend Kira's money on. By the end of the second year of their life together, less than $2 million remained from the inheritance. Kira increasingly caught herself thinking that something was going wrong. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to object, because formally all the expenses were reasonable. Repairs, a car, treatment, vacation. What can you say? But why all these reasonable expenses concerned exclusively her money, while Dmitriev's savings remained untouched, Kira could not understand. But the worst thing was not the money, but the fact that in Elvira Gennadievna's eyes there appeared the confidence of a person who knows that you can ask for anything, and they will give it to you anyway. And that Dmitry perceived this as the norm. His mother asks, his wife pays. Everyone is happy. Akira worked for $30,000 a month, saving on lunches and coffee, wearing old clothes and understanding that she had turned into a cash cow for other people's needs. But for now she was silent, hoping that love and family relationships were more important than money. How wrong she was. By the beginning of the 7th year from the wedding, Kira's life had turned into some kind of absurd performance, where she played the role of a reliable ATM. Elvira Gennadievna no longer asked. She informed about her needs as if about something, of course, taken for granted. "Karachka, darling," she said, entering their apartment without calling. I looked at my friends' apartments after renovation. You know, I felt so ashamed of my bedroom. 20-year-old wallpaper, Soviet furniture. No, I can't do this anymore. And the usual spectacle began. Dmitry nodded sympathetically. Kira silently listened to the estimates for the renovation, and a week later another amount was transferred from the inheritance account for the needs of her mother-in-law. The bedroom was renovated for $300,000. Then it was the living room's turn, another $400,000. The kitchen was updated for $250,000, and when Elvira Gennadievna saw how her apartment had been transformed, she decided that the old dacha no longer met the new standards. Can you imagine? Guests from the city come to visit me, see such beauty in the apartment, and then to the dacha, and everything is the same as before, she lamented. It's somehow awkward. The dacha also had to be brought up to scratch. New furniture for all the rooms, modern appliances, landscape design of the site. Another $500,000, how could it not used to be? And then Elvira Genadivna discovered medical tourism. Quote, Galina Stepanovna went to Israel, underwent a full examination, she said during another family dinner. She says they have such technologies there. Our doctors only look superficially, and there they study every organ. And they found problems in her that our doctors didn't even suspect. And what was she treated there? Quote, Dmitri asked. Of course, she says, it's better to get examined and treated properly once than to spend your whole life running around our hospitals. True, it's expensive, $400, but health is more important. Kira wasn't even surprised when a week later Elvira Genadivna brought printouts from the websites of Israeli clinics. Dmitri studied the price lists with a serious look. His mother-in-law told her about unique methods and revolutionary approaches to treatment. Mom, maybe you should get examined by our doctors first, Dmitri suggested timidly. What if everything is fine anyway? Dimachka, my dear, Elvira Genadivna smiled indulgently. Our medicine is 20 years behind. What can they find with their old equipment? And time is running out, health does not wait. She flew to Israel for 2 weeks, returned with a bunch of tests, reports in Hebrew and English, recommendations for further treatment. It turns out that the doctors there found a lot of hidden problems in her and prescribed a course of expensive procedures. Quote, can you imagine? She told her friends on the phone, so loudly that Kira would definitely hear. It turns out that I have chronic adrenal fatigue. And our doctors said, age-related. It's good that I managed to get examined in time. The treatment lasted for 6 months. Expensive drugs that could only be ordered from abroad. Repeated trips for a control examination, special nutrition and dietary supplements. Every month new expenses of 50–70,000 rubles. Meanwhile, Elvira Genadivna acquired new hobbies, signed up for painting courses to develop her creative potential. She bought professional paints, hired a private teacher, and then got into yoga. She needed a special uniform, mats, and trips to seminars with famous instructors. At my age, it is especially important to develop. She reasoned philosophically, you can't let your brain stagnate. Galina Stepanovna says that intellectual activity is the best prevention of senile dementia. Kira listened to this reasoning and felt some strange numbness growing inside her. She had been working in her design studio for 8 years already. During this time, her salary had grown to 40,000 rubles. 40,000. And Elvira Genadivna spent more than Kira earned on some painting courses. And the wildest thing is that no one saw anything strange in this. Dmitri still admired his mother, her active life position, her desire for self-improvement, and his mother-in-law still thanked Kira for her support, called her the best daughter-in-law in the world and swore never to forget it. But her tone no longer had the timid gratitude that it had in the first years. Now it sounded more like an assessment of a job well done. As if Kira were a hired manager for solving the family's financial issues, and not a real daughter-in-law. By the end of the 6th year, a little more than 1,000,000 rubles remained from the inheritance. Kira sometimes went into the banking application, looked at the balance and could not believe it. 5 million rubles. Such money seemed inexhaustible, but turned out to be finite, like everything in this world. Dmitri still saved his salary. He already had almost 2 million in his account, more than what was left from Kira's inheritance. But this money lived its own life, inviolable and sacred. Our future, that's what he called them, and he never once suggested spending a penny on Mom's needs. Kira tried to talk to him one evening. Don't you think that we spend too much on your mom? In what sense? He was surprised, without looking up from the laptop. Well, almost 4 million was spent over 6 years. That's a lot of money. Dmitri closed the laptop and looked at her with slight reproach. We didn't spend it on nonsense. Repairs, a car, treatment, everything necessary. And then Mom worked all her life. She deserved a good old age. And our old age? I'm saving for our old age, he reminded. I already have almost 2 million set aside. But why is all the spending only from my money? Dmitri frowned. Again, you start dividing into yours and mine. I thought we already discussed this. We have a family, a common budget. A common budget is when both income and expenses are common. And what we get is, we spend my money, we save yours. Kira, what are you saying? Dmitri was sincerely indignant. I pay for the apartment, for food, for utilities, and saving is an investment in our future, in the children we will have. Children, Kira repeated tiredly. And when will they be, these children? I'm already 30, and we keep putting it off and putting it off. Well, when we finally get on our feet, buy a bigger apartment, settle in. What money will we buy it with? With your savings. With our savings, Dmitri corrected. Listen, what's wrong with you lately? You've become kind of nervous. You talk about money all the time. Kira. She wanted to say that she was nervous because she felt like a cash cow, that she was tired of financing other people's whims while her own life passed her by, that she worked for $40,000 a month and saved on lunches, while her mother-in-law spent hundreds of thousands on painting courses, but she kept quiet because Dmitri would not have heard. For him, everything was logical and fair. Mom was in trouble, his wife was helping, everyone was happy, and the fact that trouble was called the desire to live no worse than her friends, for some reason did not bother him. And then Kira realized that she was in a trap, a beautiful, cozy one, but a trap. She turned into a source of financing someone else's beautiful life, and her own needs, dreams, plans, all this faded into the background. The 7th year began with another of Elvira's ideas. During the New Year holidays, she met a woman who was engaged in antiques. Quote, "Can you imagine what an interesting business it is?" my mother-in-law said enthusiastically. You buy antiques, study their history, and then sell them to collectors. They're both beautiful and profitable. Mom, you don't understand anything about antiques, Dmitri timidly objected. You can study, Elvira Gennadievna waved him off. There are courses, books, the internet. And what an interesting environment, auctions, exhibitions, collectors, a completely different level of communication. Antique dealer courses cost 150,000 rubles, plus startup capital for the first purchases of another 300,000. Plus trips to auctions in Moscow and St. Petersburg, membership in collectors' clubs, specialized literature. By the summer, more than 500,000 had been spent on the new hobby, and in the fall, Elvira Gennadievna suddenly cooled towards antiques. Quote, "You know," she confided to Kiri, "it turns out there are a lot of scammers in this business. They sell fakes as originals, and they inflate the prices. I decided not to take risks while I have little experience." Antiques were replaced by studying foreign languages, then psychology courses, then culinary master classes with famous chefs. Each new hobby required investment, and each time Dmitri found convincing explanations why his mother needed to develop and why it was worth the money spent. And in December of the 7th year, something happened that Kira would later call the last straw. Dmitri came home in an unusually good mood, hugged her, kissed her, poured wine and solemnly announced, "I have great news for you." What kind of news? Kira was wary. Mom had finally decided on her plans for the future. Quote, remember, she kept saying that it was uncomfortable to live alone in a big apartment. Well, she found the perfect option. Kira's heart sank. She already knew what she was about to hear. Quote, a 3-room apartment in the city center, Dmitri continued. near the park, not far from the theaters and museums. Mom looked at it and said it was just the perfect place for her new lifestyle. And the price is normal, 1.00. There will even be a little change left. Change from what? Kira asked quietly. What do you mean from what? Dimitri was surprised. From the remaining money, we still have more than $1 million, right? Kira looked at her husband and did not understand whether he was joking or serious. Did he really think that the remaining million and a bit should also go to Mom's needs? Dim, she said slowly, this is the last money from my inheritance. So what? Quote, he shrugged, money should work, bring benefits, and not lie like dead weight in the account. Mom will buy an apartment, settle in, and we will be calm about her future. And our future is my savings. I told you 100 times. Your savings, repeated Kira, which you have never spent on your mother. Dimitri frowned. Kira, you are at it again. My savings are our family reserve, and the inheritance, well, it is like a gift from fate, a nice bonus. So we spend it on nice things. On nice things for your mother. For our family, corrected Dimitri. Mom, part of our family. Or have you forgotten? Kira got up from the table and went to the window. It was snowing outside, settling in large flakes on the glass, beautifully and calmly, and inside her, a storm was raging. When will she arrive? She asked without turning around. Tomorrow by lunchtime. Wants to discuss the details, look at the ad with us. Mom says, young people can see better which areas are promising. I see. Kira, aren't you angry? Dimitri's voice took on a note of concern. Mom just struggled with the choice for so long, and now she's finally decided. She wants to get everything done as soon as possible before the apartment goes to other buyers. Quote, I'm not angry, Kira answered evenly. Everything is fine. And that was the truth. She really wasn't angry. The anger had gone somewhere, dissolved, leaving behind a strange emptiness and some unusual clarity of thought. Kira understood that tomorrow Elvira Gennadievna would not come to discuss the purchase of the apartment. She would come to inform about her decision, as she had done all these years, first making a decision, then looking for ways to justify it, and in the end presenting the family with a fait accompli. And Dimitri, as always, would be on his mother's side, would find 1,000 arguments in favor of the purchase, would tell about how important it is to provide parents with a decent old age, would remind them of family values, and then the last million of the inheritance would go to another of her mother's whims, and Kira would finally turn into what she had long ago become, a convenient source of financing someone else's beautiful life. But tomorrow is tomorrow, and today she had one more night to think everything over. Dimitri went to bed in a great mood, making plans for arranging his mother's new apartment. Akira was lying next to him and looked at the ceiling, listening to his measured breathing. At 5 o'clock in the morning, she quietly got up, went to the kitchen and turned on the laptop, went into the banking application, looked at the balance of the account. 1,137,000 rubles. All that was left of her father's inheritance. And then opened a new tab and began to study how to draw up a deed of gift for the apartment. She had a few hours before Elvira Gennadievna arrived, and Kira decided to use this time with maximum benefit. Kira went to the hallway, took the envelope from the chest of drawers and returned to the living room. Elvira Gennadievna and Dimitri continued to discuss the merits of the apartment, not paying attention to it. Quote, and there's such a cozy park nearby, the mother-in-law said. In the mornings you can walk, breathe fresh air. For my age, this is very important. Quote, Mom, is the management company there normal? Dimitri was interested. Otherwise, the house may be nice, but the service is lousy. Kira silently placed the envelope on the table next to the salad bowl. The white envelope looked strange among the remains of the holiday dinner. Quote, what is this? Elvira Gennadievna finally noticed. Documents, Kira answered calmly, sitting down in her place. What documents? Dmitri reached for the envelope. A certificate of closing a bank account, Kira began listing. A deed of gift for an apartment in my sister's name, a divorce application. Dead silence fell. Elvira Nadaevna froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Dmitri stared at his wife as if she were speaking Chinese. Quotes. What? What did you say? He muttered. There's no more money, Kira repeated patiently. The apartment is no longer mine. The marriage no longer exists. At least, it won't exist soon. Dmitri feverishly opened the envelope, took out the documents, ran his eyes over the bank statement, then the deed of gift. His face turned ashen. What have you done? He whispered. What you should have done a long time ago, Kira answered. She regained control of her own life. Elvira Gennadievna finally came to her senses. The fork fell onto the plate with a clang. How come there is no money? She asked in confusion. Where did it go? Spend it, Kira answered briefly. On what? On charity. Orphanages, animal shelters, help for children, on those who really need help, and not on another whim of a spoiled woman. Quote. You're crazy, Elvira Gennadievna squealed. This money was family money. You had no right. It did, Kira answered calmly. According to the law, an inheritance belongs only to the heir. It does not matter whether it was received before or after marriage. I could do whatever I wanted with this money. But we planned it. Dmitri still couldn't believe what was happening. The apartment is for Mom. Our future. Your future, Kira corrected. I wasn't part of your plans, only as a source of funding. Kira Elvira Gennadievna jumped up from the table. Do you understand what you've done? I've already made arrangements with the sellers. I gave my word. How can I explain it to them now? I can't, Kira shrugged. These are your problems, not mine. But I am your mother-in-law. Elvira Gennadievna's voice took on hysterical notes. We are family. I've done so much for you, cared for you, loved you like your own daughter. Kira laughed briefly, without joy. Cared for you, loved you? Elvira Gennadievna, in 7 years you spent almost 4 million of my money on yourself. And you've never once asked how I'm doing. You haven't asked what I want, what I dream about. I was your daughter-in-law, and an ATM. How dare you? Elvira Gennadievna turned white with rage. Ungrateful, I am like a mother to you. You are nobody to me, Kira cut her off. And you never were nobody. Just a greedy woman who decided that other people's money rightfully belonged to her. Dima? Elvira Gennadievna turned to her son. Quote, do you hear how she talks to me? Tell her something. Dmitri sat, staring at the documents, then slowly raised his head. Kira, maybe we can discuss everything calmly, find a compromise. But you couldn't really spend all the money. You could and you did, Kira confirmed. And you know what? For the first time in 7 years, I feel happy. Are you crazy? Dmitri exploded. How could you throw away so much money? We could, quote. We could have bought your mother an apartment, Kira finished for him. Then she would have found a new need. A bigger car, more expensive travel, some more courses, and then more and more, until she spent every penny. Quote. But this is a family, Dmitri tried to object. Nudge each other. Help? Yes. But support other people's whims at your own expense? No, Elvira Gennadievna tried to grab Kira's hand. Quote, Karachka, my dear, what are you doing? We can fix everything. We'll talk to the bank, to the notary. Kira abruptly pulled her hand back and, to make sure, nudged her mother-in-law in the solar plexus with her elbow. Not hard, but sensitive. Elvira Gennadievna gasped and stepped back. "Don't touch me," Kira said coldly. "And don't build illusions, we won't fix anything." "Kira," Dmitri jumped up, wanted to say something, but got such a slap on the back of the head that his glasses flew to the floor. "What are you doing?" "What you should have done a long time ago," repeated Kira, getting up from the table. "And now, excuse me, I have to go." She calmly went into the bedroom, took the suitcase she had packed in advance. Voices could be heard in the living room. Dmitri was explaining something to his mother. She was sobbing and wailing. "Where are you going?" Dmitri asked in confusion when Kira appeared with a suitcase. "To my sister temporarily, and then I'll start a new life without you." "But we can discuss everything," he pleaded. "Kira, what happened? Why are you so abrupt?" Quote, "Nothing abrupt, Dim. It's just that I waited 7 years for you to understand what was going on. But you still didn't understand. You didn't want to understand. For you, I was a convenient source of money for your mother, nothing more." "That's not true." Dmitri was indignant. "I love you." "You love my bank account," Kira answered tiredly. "And now that the account is empty, let's see what's left of this love." She headed for the door, turned around on the threshold. Elvira Gennadievna was sitting in a chair, clutching a handkerchief to her chest, and quietly sobbing. Dmitri was standing in the middle of the living room with documents in his hands, as if not understanding what had happened. "By the way," Kira added, "in a week you will receive a summons to court. I will demand compensation for the money spent. My lawyer thinks we have a good chance." Quote, "What compensation?" Dmitri was taken aback. "For 4 million rubles, spent not on family needs, but on the maintenance of your mother. By law, you are obliged to return half. I do not have that kind of money." "Yes, there are more than 2 million in your account. If it is not enough, you will sell your apartment, car, the court will sort it out." Dmitri turned pale, realizing the scale of the catastrophe, and Elvira Gennadievna sobbed louder. "And you, Elvira Gennadievna," Kira turned to her, "can sell your renovated apartment or car or go to Israel once more. Maybe they will teach you how to live on a pension there." "How cruel you are," moaned the mother-in-law. "And after everything I did for you." "What exactly did you do for me?" Quote, Kira was sincerely surprised. "Remind me." Elvira Gennadievna opened her mouth, but did not answer. Indeed, apart from consuming Kira's money, she did not bring anything useful to them. "That's what I'm talking about," Kira nodded. "Goodbye. See you in court." Quote. She left the apartment and closed the door. 7 years of deception, illusions, and wasted hopes were behind her. The unknown awaited her, but for some reason it didn't scare her. On the contrary, for the first time in many years, Kira felt truly free. The trial lasted for 2 years. Dmitri tried to prove that all the expenses were family expenses, but the documents spoke for themselves. Repairs to his mother-in-law's dacha, buying a car for her, paying for her resorts and hobbies. All of this could hardly be called family expenses. In the end, the court ordered Dmitri to pay Kira compensation in the amount of 2 million rubles. He didn't have enough money. He had to sell the apartment and the car. And when even that wasn't enough, the bailiff seized the property. Elvira Gennadievna developed hypertension due to stress and spent all her savings on treatment. She refused to sell the apartment until the very end, but in the end she had to move to a one-room apartment on the outskirts. She could not afford more. Mother and son now lived together in a cramped apartment, constantly arguing and blaming each other for what had happened. Elvira Gennadievna blamed Dmitri for not being able to keep his wife. Dmitri blamed his mother for greed and immoderate appetites. And Kira opened her own design studio with the money she received as compensation. Things went well. It turned out that over the years she had accumulated enough experience and connections. The studio grew, regular clients appeared, and she had to hire assistants. The year after the divorce, she met the artist Maxim. Tall, a little absent-minded, with kind eyes and golden hands, he lived modestly, but with dignity. He never asked about her income and did not ask her to lend money. "You know," he said when their relationship became serious, "all I have is an old studio and a bunch of unfinished paintings. If you were counting on a prince with a castle, you've come to the wrong address." Quote, Kira laughed and hugged him. After 7 years of living with a man who saw her as a source of finance, meeting a man who valued her was real happiness. They got married without pomp in a small circle of friends. Maxim insisted on paying for the wedding in half, although his half was much more modest than Kira's. "This is our holiday," he said, exactly the same words that Dmitri had once said. But the difference was that Maxim really felt it and didn't just talk beautifully. They bought an apartment for two, also in half. Each contributed their share. They furnished it together, chose furniture together, planned the future together. And when Maxim said ours, he really meant theirs together, and not just Kira's. Sometimes Kira met her ex-husband on the street. He grew old, haggard. A kind of faded doom appeared in his eyes. Once he tried to talk to her, muttering something about the mistakes of his youth and the possibility of fixing everything. But Kira passed him by without stopping. She had a new life, a real family where no one took advantage of anyone, a job that brought joy and a good income, plans, dreams, hopes. And somewhere in a one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city, mother and son continued to quarrel, remembering the golden times of someone else's inheritance and dreaming of what could have been if Kira had been more accommodating. But this was no longer her story. Her story began anew on that February day when she finally found the strength to say, "Enough," and take her life back.